Jujutsu Kaisen is back with yet another banger. The show's openings have become incredibly recognizable, both for their absolutely face-melting animation quality and for their distinct visual style. And this fifth entry in the series shows many of the same hallmarks, but the style also continues to evolve and iterate on itself. This thing is absolutely packed with detail, insane animation, and references to several different periods of art history. And while all these elements initially feel all over the place, they actually all come together like a jigsaw puzzle or an alien conspiracy theory to form surprisingly cohesive themes of death and birth, transformation, and a clash between modern culture and a mythical past. So let's take a deep dive and break down all those things I just done said in detail and see how they all converge. I'm Swamp John, by the way. King Gnu returns with their song Aizo, but for the first time the visual side of things were storyboarded and directed by the series director himself, Shota Goshizono, aka Goso, who took over the lead role on the show starting from season 2. This opening is way more eclectic than the last one, but it carries forward some of the same ideas and features, like metamorphosis, which was represented by that nasty hand cocoon thing, or the overpowering redness that filled basically every single shot. We open on this haunting image of Tokyo transformed, literally flipped upside down and lit almost exclusively by the harsh red light of what appears to be an eclipsed sun. Itadori strolls into the shot and his head reveals Geto/Kenjaku's godlike eye peering down over the city in this beautifully realistic cut by key animator Yurika Nakanishi, who had a hand in a large portion of this opening. I would wager there has to be some rotoscoping going on here, at least in the wrinkles of the fabric of his clothes, because they move in a way that's very unintuitive to imagine, but still appears realistic to the eye. Nakanishi seems to have left very little to in-between animators here, because about half of the final frames are present in the original key animation, an unusually high proportion. This is also possibly the first of many references to art history, and definitely the most tenuous, so bear with me and we'll get to the others in a while. As Twitter user Here for the Art pointed out, the cityscape and eclipsed sun look similar to many of the entries in surrealist artist Max Ernst's Forest series from the late 1920s, in which he brought to life the feelings of fear and fascination with the forests around his house from childhood. He used a rubbing technique to transfer the texture of pieces of wood to paper, and many of these paintings transform the forest into a strange, mysterious structure that almost resembles a cityscape. You might have already seen one of these lists of references, but well, first of all, I haven't yet found one that's actually fully complete, but also I want to go deeper than just listing them, because there's actually some really cool stuff you can glean from which pieces they chose to reference and the connections between them. Make a mental note, tie a little string around your finger or something. We'll come back to this in a little while. The first of many visual metaphors shows a hand, presumably Skuna's, igniting a gas stove. Then we cut to this 3D shot of a giant explosion at the center of a metropolitan area, with the blue flames of the gas stove overlaid on top. I'm not sure if this is intentional or just a cool coincidence, but the eighth notes on the floor tom in the song at this moment remind me of the clicking sound of a gas stove sparking before it ignites. In a marvel of storyboarding elegance, that explosion transitions seamlessly into these three action cuts, Yuta and Yuji plunging into the depths of the city and soaring above it respectively, and Choso just orbing out, I guess. Everybody needs some orbin time to calm their nerves here and there. But seriously folks, this guy looks like a little baby floating in a tube, fetal position style. Did somebody say themes of birth and parentage? These cuts were done by the wickedly talented, one and only key animator Kaito Tomioka, whose work on this show and Chainsaw Man is always incredible, and who, for the OG swamp heads out there, also did this cut of Chilchuck fleeing from a mimic in Dungeon Meshi, which I yapped about for entirely too long. Key animator Keiichiro Watanabe takes the brief and unceremonious moment of Maki's immolation from last season and turns it into this tragically beautiful pirouette. This cut only lasts 1 second, but it might be my favorite one in the whole opening. It showcases one of the big staples of the JJK style, loose impressionistic effects that flow like whitewater rapids across the screen with little to no outlines and so many little details and particles that it usually simply has to be animated in full 24 frames per second to maintain any sort of readability. Watanabe was also behind this one. Maki is made up of dozens of loosely connected patches of color that swirl, fly off, and intertwine intertwine with the flames. Many of these frames are so abstract that if you pause on one of them, it's hard to make out exactly what's going on, but the energy of the strokes flow together, so in motion it becomes intelligible. Interestingly, the base of the fire is painted underneath the strokes that make up Maki herself, which has two effects. First, it makes it look like rather than burning from the outside in, the fire is coming from the core of her own body, which, along with the pirouette, gives a sense of metamorphosis. Second, the darker shapes on top can act as shadows, while the lighter colors of the flames also act as highlights, like in this frame where Watanabe lets the pale yellow base color shine through at the edges of Maki's hair and the underside of her eyebrow, creating the effect of a bright underlight from the flames reflecting off these shapes. Or here, the sharp color contrast forms the wrinkles in her clothes. The strokes may seem haphazard, but they're not random by any means. Just one more example, because I saved the best one for last. These disjointed chunks of neck and ear over the red base color actually define the anatomy of her neck, where the sternocleidomastoid muscle protrudes from the side. These illustrations of Maki and Yuta harken back to some of the last masters of Edo period Ukiyo-e woodblock prints. These poses reoccur over and over in works depicting various legendary heroes and fearsome beasts, mostly by Kuniyoshi and some of his contemporaries, other members of the Utagawa school, so the illustrations could be referencing any of a good handful of pieces. But this one most closely resembles Kashiwade no Hanoshi killing a Korean tiger that devoured his daughter by Kuniyoshi in 1830. While we're on the topic of a revenge story, many of these paintings also hint at plot elements, but I won't be going into that very much, to avoid spoiling it, but also because I'm sure someone else has already done a better job at it than I would. Frankly, I don't have a damn clue what's going on in this show most of the time. Meanwhile, this still shows Yuta killing a cursed spirit to save a young girl after returning to Japan. It's sort of a blend of two different Kuniyoshi pieces. Wada Heita Tanenaga killing a giant snake from 1834, and the much later Morozumi Bungo no Kami Masakiyo, one of 3 historic deaths in battle from 1848. This one's clearly the main inspiration. It matches the beams of light and even the second katana above his head, except that, crucially, this painting depicts Morozumi not slaying a mythical beast, but committing seppuku during the Battle of Kawanakajima, so he's holding the blade of the sword with the tip in his mouth rather than stabbing with it, and the beams of light are actually beams of explosion, either from cannon fire or from some sort of explosive device driving the sword into his mouth. All the descriptions I could find conflicted with each other, so I'm not 100% sure. These 3 cuts by Sota Shigetsugu are all callbacks. In this one, Maki's dance looks a lot like a much less on-fire version of that other one from a few seconds ago, and these 2 call back to the first opening from Season 2, which was all about falling down the side of a building, except in a much more cheerful way. Also, I don't know if this is a storyboarding choice or a key animation one, but look how seamless this match cut is. Maki's hand swings across the screen, and Yuji continues the motion from a pose that almost matches where she would have ended up in the next frame, guiding your eye from one cut to the next. Looks like Skuna got plastered at the office Christmas party and now he's staring at himself in the mirror for 3 minutes. I walk a lonely. This is a reference to Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex Season 2, and I love the details and subtle rotation of Kenjaku's hand in this black and white cut, where he daintily places a colony barrier over a scale miniature in what looks like a museum setting. This clever shot-reverse shot puts us back in color and separates the inside of the barrier from the world outside, while revealing that the eclipsed sun from the start was no sun at all. Shingo Yamashita hasn't done one of these openings since Season 1, but his trademark tracking shot of a person strolling purposefully down a hallway is still represented, except Nanami has passed the torch to Maki. Though honestly, this one's a little underwhelming since it's just a regular walk cycle from one angle without the camera rotation that made the original so striking. The crazy spotlights are a nice touch, but it would have been even cooler if the lighting and shadows on Maki actually changed with the changing light sources. As it is, it's just this one little rim light, and they've boosted the exposure of the entire cut when the lights go by, but the actual primary blocks of light and shadow stay the same. If you want to help me keep making videos like this, please do all the algorithm stuff. Shares and comments are the most helpful, and if you really want to support the channel, consider literally supporting it through Patreon, where depending on the tier, you can also get access to occasional bonus videos and stuff, your name in the credits, and see these videos 3 days early and without ads. Here we are, the rapid-fire salvo of art history references. Let's quickly list them all all, then we can start to see what common threads connect them, starting with this rendition of Dead Mother by Egon Schiele from 1910. At once tender and grotesque, the original expressionist painting explores sacrifice, death, and life, and the balance between the two. This version features baby Itadori with his own mother with recognizable sutures across her forehead. Whoever did this has done a great job of imitating the style of the original, particularly in the texture of the brush strokes and scrapes and the subtle green and red hues in the mother's skin and crooked emaciated fingers. Even the kind of bizarre white nostrils in the original. Some of the other imitations we'll see seem digital, but I wonder if this one was actually painted traditionally. I might have to see it in higher resolution to be able to tell for sure. Maki and Mai imitate the 17th century painting Two Sleeping Children by Peter Paul Rubens, although it's not as much of a direct reproduction, with softer details and there's still some visible line work in many places. Then Masamichi and Panda do their best impression of Claude Monet's impressionist painting Camille Monet and Child in Artist's Garden in Argenteuil from 1875. I cannot pronounce French words to save my life, I did my best. This one's got some really nice texture too, but they've added these weird patches of directional blur on top for some reason. I assume that was done after the fact. I don't know, maybe they didn't think it looked enough like it was painted by a guy slowly going blind? I wish they hadn't, though. Continuing the theme of mothers and children, this is less of a direct imitation and more of a nod to this arguably expressionist sketch by Käthe Kollwitz, Mother with Child in Her Arms from 1916. Kollwitz's younger son Peter had died in World War I, and this was one of many pieces from a period of deep depression for her. Apparently, this is a deep cut from the manga too. Kusakabe's little sister and her son? That's what Reddit tells me, but I won't pretend to know anything about that. The most recognizable of the bunch is, of course, this animated close-up take on Edvard Munch's The Scream from 1893 by animator Ryota Aike. But a less well-known fact is that this is actually a reference to one offhanded joke I made in my video on a recent trend in anime openings that started with JJK Season 1.
Learn to draw, Edvard Munch. That is literally not even what a guy is supposed to look like.
It's weird to see these clearly defined outlines of shapes and shadows and the realistic teeth, where The Scream famously has none of those things, but the colors and long flowing brush strokes are enough to conjure the idea of the Scream in a format that's more animatable. I think the detail that makes this cut work is the way the jaw tilts to the side with the motion of the head. It brings back a little expressionism to what is really a fairly realistic series of images. It's just so cool whenever someone animates something in a painted style. It goes against all common sense and makes everything so much harder, but the result is so unique. I love this cut. These two beautiful paintings of transformed civilians, Remy and Rin, are tragically only on the screen for a third of a second each. They resemble any number of paintings from graphic designer turned painter Tadanori Yoko's Y Junction series from 2000, where he photographed forked roads like these all throughout Tokyo, often at night, and reproduced them in this fantastical, mildly impressionistic style. The junctions present a choice to the viewer, a literal fork in the road, perhaps between honesty and deceit for the humans participating in the culling game represented by these two, and much like Max Ernst's forests from the start, they transform these real locations into something dreamlike, bringing a bit of fantasy and mystery to them, the allure of the unknown. They also often heavily feature the color red creeping into every little corner like it does in this piece. For Yoko, the red represents air raids and flames in the distance, while here it's more about the spreading influence of Kenjaku and the cursed spirits. But with this bomb motif that keeps popping up, there's a clear connection there too. This is a reference to The Three Judges by Honoré Daumier in 1860, thanks to this Twitter user for pointing this one out. And this one, The Kiss by Gustav Klimt from 1907, but with Yuta and Kuro-urushi. Klimt's masterpiece combines a lot of different styles and traditions, but two major influences are earlier Impressionist paintings and Japanese Ukiyo-e woodblock prints, which you can see in the stylized composition of the flat shapes and bold blocks of color. You may have noticed some connections between many of these paintings. Thematically, literally love, death, birth, motherhood, but also stylistically, ukiyo-e prints and lots of impressionism, as well as some early examples of its emo counterpart, expressionism, generally the early foundations of modernism. And this is no coincidence. The European impressionists from the late 1800s and early 1900s were actually influenced by Edo period artwork. At that time, Japanese art was starting to proliferate for the first time, and it unlocked possibilities in the minds of European painters that led them to stray from the very formal and strictly realistic standards of art at the time. They started using more graphical, stylized approaches with bolder and more symbolic shapes and colors, depicting everyday scenes and playing with perspective, flattening a space with two distinct layers, or emphasizing the depth of a space with strong leading lines. Monet even had a personal collection of Japanese art, as did Vincent van Gogh. You can really see the ukiyo-e style in his work, and not just because he literally placed them in many of his own paintings or just straight up traced and reproduced them. And Max Ernst's forests even literally involved pressing pieces of wood to paper, though I'm not sure he was directly influenced. So we're focusing specifically on this period of transformation and the intersection of two worlds that were until recently completely separate, like the world of regular people and the world of sorcerers and cursed spirits. By the end of the 19th century, though, the Meiji Restoration had happened and the art of ukiyo-e was already mostly a thing of the past. And they've chosen specifically to imitate Kuniyoshi, who was particularly focused on what was at the time already a mythical past filled with heroes and battles and great beasts. So it's not just a clash of cultures and geography, but of time periods. The mythical past of heroes and demons seeping into the modern era, and the tension between the two, which is really the whole aesthetic of Jujutsu Kaisen. This series of colorful action cuts featuring more work from Ike and Nakanishi are fully animated on ones, and do an incredible job defining shapes in 3D space by using high contrast light and shadow with unusually placed light sources, mostly blasting in from the side of the frame or from underneath. Here's a fun detail: the only one of these cuts with more than one light source is this one of Itadori, where there's an orange rim light off to the right somewhere, but the majority of the light is coming from his fist. As he winds up for a punch and pulls that fist back, the shadows on his face and clothes move with it, wrapping around the shapes as they go. Look at how this little shadow in the pocket under his eye grows and then suddenly merges with the shadow under his brow and defines the bridge of his nose, right at the moment when his hand moves far enough back that the nose is now blocking the entire eye socket from the light. Incredible attention to detail. As the music ramps up toward the end and the cuts get faster and faster, the opening continues to push those themes I was talking about in an increasingly demented frenzy and incorporate vibes from all over the timeline of human culture. This crazy abstract hologram thing, idol stuff, I guess. The Parthenon cuts to an old-timey photo of the Zenin clan. The aesthetics of like 70s glam rock and psychedelia in these two cuts, and then these hectic collages by Nakanishi, which also invoke pop art and ukiyo-e again, with its flat, stylized images and bright colors. This is just clearly the dark side of the moon, and this cut has a sort of nostalgic VHS filter on it. Whoa, careful where you point that thing, dog! And finally, for the last painting reference, we return to Death and Sacrifice with Mai as Ophelia in Ophelia by John Everett Millais, which depicts the death of Ophelia from Shakespeare's Hamlet. The flowers stand in for a reed branch gifted to her sister Maki. This is possibly the most referenced painting of all time, starting with Laurence Olivier's Hamlet from 1948, and most recently Frieren and Taylor Swift. And we close it all out by returning to Kenjaku in a circle again, which this time is an explosion from the bomb that we keep seeing throughout, but also kinda looks like film burning up on a projector. Well, there you have it. A further evolution of the signature style that Shingo Yamashita created in Season 1, infused with an eclectic medley of art history references that at times feels like pounding 3 5-hour energies and sprinting through an art museum at top speed. Luckily, I'm immune to caffeine and I literally can't even run very fast, so if you stroll through at a leisurely pace, the web of connections and common themes start to be revealed. If you liked this video, you should check out the one I did on the origin of this style and the guy behind it. That'll pop up on the screen any second, or you can just subscribe to see whatever I decide to talk about next. Thanks for watching, and a much larger and more sincere thank you to the people who give me money to make these videos over on Patreon. Smack and Josh, Scorpionte, KDL, Serial Carlisle, Leia Pico, Newtaf, Patrick Davison, Arborix, Jun, Dr. Yola McSwag, Grab G, Joe, Fogunugget, Annie, Sammy Z, Nozomi Corgi, Machu Stepek, Juicebox, Bloodsbane, Orwing, and Chris Ushi, as well as all the other names you're seeing on the screen right now. See you next time.